2020, Afghanistan. Just minutes after some gunmen slaughtered her parents, Kamar Gul grabs her father's AK-47 and blows him away. Now, this would pale in comparison to what other daughters have done to avenge their parents' murder. So we got some daughters here for you who brutally avenge their parents' murders.
مادر پیرم هر تر بیرون کردن هر تر تیرباران کردن بدم چشم ما آخر مجبور شدیم سال پیار خود بگرفتیم شروع بزدیم 2 نفرش کشته شد یکی هم تیپشی داشته.
In July 2020, a teenage Afghan girl becomes a symbol of courage after she shoots and kills 2 Taliban militants with her family's AK-47 for killing her parents in their home in Ghor Province, Afghanistan. Now, the incident happened just around 1 a.m. on July 17, 2020. When the village of Gedeve was awakened by the sound of gunfire, with about 40 Taliban fighters storming into the home of Shah Gul Rahimi, a local village chief. Now, the fighters targeted Rahimi, Kamar Gul's father, who supported the Afghan government and had reportedly resisted Taliban demands for tax payments. According to local officials, the Taliban broke into their house after Kamar's mother, Fatima, refused to open the door upon seeing armed men. They shot and killed her with 3 bullets to the chest and neck. And then outside the house, they executed Shah Gul with 6 more. Kamar Gul, who was asleep with her brother, Habibullah, woke up to the commotion, and everything just felt different. Fueled by fear and fury, she grabs her father's AK-47 and without hesitation, she opens fire, killing 2 of the attackers, injuring several others, and reportedly even hit a senior commander. Some witnesses said that she didn't stop shooting until the gun clicked empty. When Kamar paused, her brother picked up that rifle and fired at the wounded commander as he fled. That night, she stands guard, rifle in hand, protecting her brother in a house now soaked in silence and blood. By sunrise, the commander returns with reinforcements to continue the attack, but the villagers and local government militia had intervened, with a tough gunfight that forced the Taliban to retreat. It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic, but raw, instinctive responses to unimaginable trauma. A daughter turning grief into resistance in the only way she could. The next morning, Afghan security forces relocated Kamar Gul and her brother to a safer location in the provincial capital, Feroz Koh, due to concerns for their safety. She survived the night, her home surrounded by fear, her heart by fury. A photograph of Kamar holding an AK-47, wearing a headscarf, would go viral on social media. Afghan officials, including President Ashraf Ghani and Vice President Amrullah Saleh, praised her bravery, with Ghani inviting her and her brother to the presidential palace. Social media posts celebrated her as a hero, with comments like,
"Hats off to her courage. Power of an Afghan girl,"
comparing her to historical figures like Malala of Maiwand, who rallied fighters against the British in 1880. Some users called for her to be sent abroad for safety, citing ongoing threats from the Taliban. But the praise would come with unease. Some voices had warned against romanticizing violence, especially when there's a kid involved. One journalist tweeted,
"This is not heroism, this is trauma."
Women's rights leaders like Fazia Kufi said that her actions sent a powerful message to the Taliban that Afghan women were not to be broken. Then came the controversy. According to the New York Times, one of the men Kamar shot may have been her own husband, Mohammed Naeem. The report suggested there was a family feud where Kamar had been married off to Naeem in a customary exchange, while her father took Naeem's teenage niece as a second wife. Now, the arrangement didn't work because tensions arose due to his mistreatment of his first wife, and debts had piled up, so he moved to Helmand Province, a Taliban stronghold, and then Naeem would join the Taliban, possibly returning to reclaim Kamar by force, and ended up getting hurt. This would show you the intricate family feuds and cultural pressures in rural Afghanistan, where women often face significant constraints. But local officials and Kamar herself denied this claim, insisting that she had no relation to any of the attackers. Meanwhile, the Taliban denies a woman had killed anyone. Instead, they blame a local militia for their losses. So without further updates, her current situation remains uncertain. After being relocated to Kabul, she was under government protection, but no recent updates confirm her location or activities, and this reflects the broader instability in Afghanistan following the Taliban's 2021 resurgence. Social media speculation suggested she might face risks, with calls for her to be sent abroad for safety and education, although there's no evidence this occurred. Concerns were raised about her future, with fears that she could be confined to a life of limited opportunities, or even face cultural repercussions in silence, such as being drawn into roles like women's policing under restrictive conditions. Either way, her courage continues to inspire, but her long-term fate still remains an open question amid Afghanistan's ongoing turmoil. You know, one thing's undeniable, though. Kamar didn't set out to become a fighter. She didn't want to make headlines. She wanted to sleep in peace, but instead, she was forced to defend her home with a rifle and the memory of her parents lying in blood outside the door. In doing so, she shattered every expectation of what a young girl and supposed victim can do. This is not a fairy tale. It's about the survival of one girl, one night, and one act that echoed far beyond the borders of her village.
E hoje eu tenho que foi através de mim que o senhor está aqui. O senhor vai pagar. Nem que seja minimamente, mas o senhor vai pagar.
In 2024, Ghislaine Silva de Deus, a woman from Boa Vista, Brazil, had made headlines for bringing her father's killer to justice 25 years after his murder. This story is a powerful example of a daughter's determination to avenge her father's death through legal means, driven by a childhood vow to seek justice. We go to February 16, 1999, when Ghislaine was 9 years old. Her father, Givaldo José Vicente de Deus, was shot dead in Boa Vista, Roraima, Brazil, over a debt of approximately $25. The killer, Raimundo Alves Gomez, takes Givaldo to a hospital, but flees afterwards. Gomez, then a supplier for Givaldo's supermarket at point-blank range, would shoot Givaldo in a bar in the Asa Branca neighborhood. He's arrested on the spot that same day. However, he's released from custody 17 days later, allowing him to respond to the legal process while free. A decision that puzzled Givaldo's family, including his daughter Ghislaine. The murder had deeply affected her, and she vowed to dedicate her life to finding her father's killer. In 2013, 14 years after the crime, Gomez was tried by the Roraima Court's Jury Tribunal. The court, presided over by Judge Irely Jose Holanda de Souza, found Gomez guilty of qualified homicide, deemed to have been committed for a futile motive, which was that minor debt. So he was convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison. But despite that conviction, no immediate arrest warrant was issued, which meant he was allowed to remain free while appealing the verdict. So after his final appeal was rejected in 2016, an arrest warrant was issued. But Gomez went on the run, evading capture for another 8 years, making Ghislaine and her family frustrated because they just lived with uncertainty about whether justice would actually be served. Now, after losing her father, Ghislaine, who was just a teenager and the oldest of 5 siblings, would step up in ways most couldn't imagine while grieving. She helped her mother raise the young ones, still excelling in school, and her father had always pushed for her to chase her dreams, so she clung to that. At just 18, she enters law school, and by 2014, she's a licensed lawyer. For Ghislaine, the courtroom wasn't enough because the man who killed her father was still out there. She needed to be closer to the system that failed to bring him in. So, in 2022, she left her law career and joined the Roraima prison system, just haunted by the image of Gomez finally walking through those gates to serve his sentence. She tells local media,
When I was a prison police officer, I always imagined the killer arriving there to serve his sentence.
That same year, she gets a glimpse of hope as one of her uncles would spot Gomez in Boa Vista, but then he vanished again before authorities could act. Once again, he just slips away before anyone could catch him. Undeterred, Ghislaine passed the civil police exam and joined the civil police as a clerk in July 2024. And when it came time for assignments, she didn't hesitate to request the work on that very case, which shaped her entire life. Immediately assigned to the General Homicide Division, or DGH. And here she tirelessly gathered info about Gomez's whereabouts, eventually locating him in a rural area outside Boa Vista. On September 25, 2024, after years of chasing shadows, it finally happened. She and her team would track Gomez down to a farm in Boa Vista's Nova Cidade. This guy was 60 years old, hiding there since he'd vanished in 2016, after being convicted in 2013 and sentenced to 12 years. Her father's killer was finally in handcuffs. At the police station, Ghislaine finally faced Gomez. She tells him,
"It's because of me that you are here, and you will pay. Even if it's minimal, you will pay."
This confrontation marked the fulfillment of her childhood vow, bringing closure to a 25-year quest for justice. The arrest was widely covered by media outlets like Daily Mail and Metro News, and posts on X praised her persistence, with one user noting her dedication since the age of 9. However, some posts would also express sympathy for the emotional toll of her journey, reflecting mixed sentiments about the personal cost of such pursuits. Every career move Ghislaine made, every late night, every exam, every shift was driven by the same quiet fire: justice for her father. And in the end, she got it. You know, Ghislaine's story really stands out because, unlike Kamar Gul's violent retaliation, her vengeance was pursued through legal and institutional means. Her case highlights the resilience of a daughter motivated by loss, as well as the challenges of and the tough reality of chasing justice in places where fugitives can disappear for years. It would underscore the psychological weight of unresolved grief, as Ghislaine's life is a haunting reminder of how that grief can linger for a lifetime. Either way, Ghislaine's world was forever changed by the trauma of her father's murder when she was just a child. The year of our Lord 179 AD in Jiquan, China. As villagers are bustling beneath a towering pagoda, no one noticed the woman stepping down from a modest carriage. She kind of looked like any other wife or mother, but tucked beneath that robe was a sword, sharpened day and night for weeks. Yeah, she wasn't a soldier nor royalty, but a daughter on a mission to get justice for her father's murder. Zhao Yi, also known by her married name Pang Yi, was a noblewoman from Gansu during the late Eastern Han Dynasty. Her father, Zhao An, was killed by a man named Li Shu, who lived in their hometown of Jiquan. Zhao Yi and her 3 brothers had all sworn to get revenge, but fate had other plans. One by one, her brothers had died of illness before they could even act, leaving Zhao Yi alone. Many thought this might have just been the end of that revenge mission, right? Even Li Shu certainly thought so. So he threw a celebration, mocking the Zhao family, saying,
"All the strong ones are dead. It's only a weak daughter remains."
The words stung and also lit a fire. Zhao Yi was the wife of Pang Zhizha and mother to a son, Pang Yu. So she was no stranger to duty, especially filial duty, one of the highest Confucian virtues. When her son repeated Li Shu's boast, she made up her mind that if no man in her family would avenge her father, then she would. Oh, neighbors tried to warn her, friends would plead with her to just let it go, because everyone was kind of afraid of Li Shu. He's a dangerous fighter that was feared amongst other fighters and was very well armed. But the warnings instead would make Zhao Yi's resolve harden, that a weak daughter wasn't about to let her father's killer sleep. So Zhao Yi quietly began sharpening that blade every day, every night. And then one morning in 179 AD, in broad daylight, she rode into the heart of Jiquan, right in front of the prefectural pagoda, where everyone could see. And she sees Li Shu on horseback, so she gets out of her carriage, draws that blade from beneath the curtain, and stabs his horse first, sending him crashing to the ground, and then goes for him. Man, in public, with no hesitation, she kills him and chops his head off. So she didn't run or make excuses, but instead walked straight to authorities and calmly said,
"My father is avenged. I request execution."
Beast. The local magistrate, Yin Jia, was so moved that he offered to resign rather than order her death. Zhao Yi refused to let his career suffer because of her, so she eventually goes home. And when a general amnesty was announced shortly after, her case was dropped for good. The entire city was stunned. Even the district lieutenant, too afraid to go against the public mood, quietly urged her to just leave the city. But Zhao Yi refused special treatment since she believed justice must be answered, even by her. Her community didn't just forgive her, they honored her and raised a stele at her home, telling the story of a daughter who stood up when everyone else was gone. And her son, Pang Yu, the very boy who once told her about Li Shu's insults, grew up to become a respected official himself. Man, Zhao Yi's story lived on for centuries. We're still talking about it. Not just because of her bravery, but because she proved that even in a world built for men, a daughter's love could reshape justice. November 13th, 1935, in Tianjin, China, just after 3 p.m., Shi Jianhua walked into a quiet Buddhist hall on Nanma Road, where former warlord Sun Quanfang was leading a sutra recitation session, kneeling in prayer, surrounded by lay devotees. And she would bring out her pistol, tucked under her sleeve. Before anyone could react, she fires 3 shots, one to the head, one to the temple, and one to the waist. The once feared general collapses in a pool of his blood. Man, he never saw it coming. Now, this wouldn't be a random act of violence. For Jianhua, this was justice of 10 years in the making. Her real name was Shi Galan, born around 1905 in Shashgang, Anhui Province. And she grows up with bound feet and a father who'd risen from farmer to military officer. So her father, Shi Kongbin, served under the Fengshan clique during the warlord era and held a top position in Shandong Province. But by October 1925, this guy's ambushed by rival Zili warlord Sun Quanfang, and he chopped off his head, displaying it in public at a Bangbu train station like a war trophy. Jianhua was around 19, but you know what? She never forgot this, and she adopts the name Shi Jianhua, literally meaning raise the sword, and spent the next decade tracking her father's killer. Sun Quanfang was deposed by the Kuomintang during the Northern Expedition and lived quietly, running a Buddhist lay society nonetheless. Kneeling and chanting really couldn't erase the humiliation he inflicted on her family, and Jianhua would move to Tianjin, join a Buddhist group under an alias, and just wait for the right moment. After shooting him, she stayed at the scene and handed out a mimeographed pamphlet explaining her motive, her father's unjust death, her family's dishonor, and her duty as a daughter. One line here read,
I have avenged my father. I request the law to punish me.
The press went wild. Tianjin Yishibao ran the headline, Blood Splatters Buddhist Shrine. Her case becomes a national obsession, turning her trial into a debate on Confucian values, female agency, and the rule of law. The defense argued she acted out of filial piety, a traditional virtue where avenging a parent's death was seen as a moral duty. After 2 appeals, China's Supreme Court upheld her sentence, but before she served time, the nationalist government pardoned her on October 14, 1936, hailing her filial thinking as a lone woman. Some say nationalist ally Fang Yishang influenced the decision. So in 1949, she's elected vice chair of the Women's Federation of Suzhou, and by 1957, she's part of the Beijing Municipal Committee. And she sadly passed away in 1979 from colorectal cancer. Her ashes spread at the West Tianling Cemetery. Man, her legacy lives on as China's most famous avenging daughter, a woman who turned grief into purpose and left a bulletproof mark on the nation's history. On January 20th, 1931, DeWitt Courthouse, Arkansas County, fell silent as the jury moved to deliver its verdict in the trial of Jack Worrells, a man accused of murdering Cicero Spence and assaulting his wife when gunshots rang. Helen Spence was born in 1912 in the remote White River backwaters of Arkansas into a family of river people known as houseboaters or river rats. Her father, Cicero Spence, was a respected boat builder and part-time preacher. They lived a simple life, surviving off fishing, trading, and traveling along the river. Helen was pretty bright, independent, and tough, molded by that river life and deeply loyal to her father. She drops out of school in the 9th grade and spends most of her time helping with the family's boat building trade. After her mother had passed away, her father remarried a woman named Laura. Meanwhile, Helen was married at 15 to a local boy named Buster Eaton, but her marriage didn't last, and she goes back to her dear father. In 1931, when Jack Worrells, a known criminal and bootlegger, murdered Cicero and raped Laura, With motive rumored to be linked to robbery and personal vendettas, the murder enraged Helen, and when justice didn't move fast enough for her liking, she takes matters into her own hands in open court. She sat amidst the spectators in the front row throughout the trial, with her grief tightening in her chest, listening to the trial of Jack Worrells. Then, as the jury foreman rose to speak, Helen stood, pulled out a .45 from her coat, and fired.
He killed my daddy,
she said calmly, her single statement echoing in the hush. 2 fatal shots again, and Jack Worrells slumps over. In October 1932, Helen Spence was convicted of manslaughter for shooting her father's killer in open court, but the public wasn't mad at her. In fact, many saw her as a hero. So when she was paroled on June 10, 1933, just 8 months later, hardly anyone was surprised. Yet revenge hadn't completely done its work. Back in February 1932, months before her conviction, a local cafe owner named Jim Bohatz, who allegedly harassed Helen, was also found dead in a quiet wooded spot. At the time, police questioned her but let her go. And then just 5 days after her release from prison, Helen walks into a Little Rock police station and calmly confesses,
I felt like I had to kill him.
By July 3, 1933, she's back behind bars, this time with a 10-year hard labor sentence at the Arkansas State Farm for Women in Jacksonville. It's a brutal place known for stripping inmates naked for whippings, forcing bizarre medical treatments, and even sending women to the city to work as prostitutes under the guise of labor. After her parole, Helen had tried to disappear into Little Rock life, using a different name, according to the Arkansas Gazette. Maybe she'd hoped for a fresh start, but that dream didn't last. Back in prison, she didn't sit still. Helen sewed extra cloth into her uniform just to escape all the way to Memphis, but then was caught and brought back. She escapes again, and each time she returns to more abuse. Whippings, solitary confinement, and humiliation. In December, she was even sent to a state hospital for evaluation, but they declared her sane and sent her right back. Then on July 10, 1934, she makes her final escape from a cage-like cell. A prison official named V.O. Brockman and a trusty inmate, Frank Martin, tracked her down on a country road. That's when Martin, a convicted murderer, raised a gun and shot Helen behind the ear, killing her on the spot. Both men were put on trial for her death, but were acquitted. Martin reportedly bragged afterward,
I shot the river girl.
Locals say that someone didn't take kindly to that, because not long after, Martin was found dead too. Some called it revenge, while whispers rumored it to be that river justice returning. Either way, Helen was buried next to her father in St. Charles, Arkansas. Locals say friends later stole her body from the funeral home and secretly reburied her under a cedar tree, concealed in the river's shadow.
I could see death in the corner, and I was looking at death, and death was looking at me.
So, Uncle Francis and Auntie Joe have literally been throwing sand.
January 14th, 2022, in Enugu Ukwu, Anambra State, Nigeria, Ifeanyi Mokwa stood at the gate of her father's mansion, stunned. A truckload of construction sand had been dumped directly in front of the compound, deliberately blocking any entry. It wasn't a construction site, but a wall meant to keep her out.
See? You see this? You see this? You see this? You see this evil? You see this abomination? You see this?
She hadn't spoken to her father, Peter Mokwa, in nearly a year. The last updates had come through her aunt's voice, Josephine Mokwa, always making excuses.
He's upstairs. He's resting. He traveled.
But you know, something just didn't add up. Her father was a retired U.S. resident who worked for 25 years in New York. After retirement, he returned to Nigeria, living off a $5,000 monthly pension and settling in a 3-story house he had built himself. Then came the silence. Months of unanswered calls. That gut feeling that something went terribly wrong made Infanya book a 2-week leave from her job in New York and fly down in Nigeria. She trusted her instinct, or as she put it, the Holy Spirit, and what she found wasn't just troubling. This was shocking and criminal. So as she climbed over the sand pile and banged on that gate, her uncle Francis and Aunt Josephine stormed out, hurling insults and demanding that she leave.
Prostitute,
They shouted,
get away from here.
but she didn't back down. That noise attracted the villagers and local youth who would come out to hear what the hell was going on, to find out that she was Peter Mokwa's daughter. They turned on Francis and Josephine, demanding answers. Finally, with force and frustration boiling over, they break into the house, and what Infanya found upstairs broke her. Her poor father was lying on a filthy mattress with a long beard, overgrown nails, and his frame sunken from malnutrition. He'd been imprisoned in his own home, by his own siblings, and left to die. The moment he saw his daughter, he smiled. Anyone could see the relief and recognition of help. Oh, salvation has finally come. Peter hadn't been sick. He hadn't gone to Abuja. He was being starved and isolated, possibly so they could access that pension and assets, as rumors have it that they started building their own house. His life didn't mean anything to them. They saw this guy as a dead man with a great income. After Peter was rescued, you'd think justice would follow quickly, but nah, that didn't happen. As the legal process in Nigeria is not encouraging at best, even with all that evidence, it never really got anywhere. Instead, what came next was a gut punch. Infanya later found out that her aunt had reported her to the police in Accra, not to talk about the abuse, not to protect Peter, but to get her arrested, most likely to deflect attention and save face. That's a shocking twist, one that would only add more pain to an already heartbreaking situation. Thankfully, the paramount ruler had stepped in and took the matter higher, to the commissioner of police, laying the abuse Peter had endured bare for all to see. And still, there were no real consequences. By June 2025, none of Peter's siblings, Francis, Josephine, or Christopher, had been charged or convicted. These were the same people who had lied, claiming Peter was safe in Abuja when in truth he was suffering right in that house. There were no investigations, no arrests made, no trial, and therefore no justice. And sadly, Nigeria's legal system just isn't built to deal with elder abuse like that. There are laws, yeah, but very little real enforcement. By July 2025, the case had all but faded from the system, so Infanya wasted no time. She got her dad to a hospital in Accra, then to Lagos, and then back to the US. She turned her energy to her father, healing him, protecting him, and making sure that he felt safe and loved again. She stopped chasing courtrooms and focused instead on the man she almost lost. She goes public with the story on TikTok under @6FootAmazon, and the internet explodes with people commending her actions.
You're worth 200 subs.
Now, this may have not been revenge, but it was a rescue mission powered by faith, fury, and love. While others had avenged death, Infanya fought to prevent it and exposed the betrayal within her own bloodline. They tried to erase her father quietly, but his daughter roared, and the whole world listened.